In this video, we're going to go over section 2.1.2, the Gantry Rework in Luke's guide. Stay tuned. So the Gantry Rework is actually just a realignment of the whole Gantry assembly. You can use this on the Ender 3, the CR10, or any model that has that single drive stepper. Let's do it. So this is exactly why we're going to do this Gantry rework. If you look at my Gantry, it is way off. Just check it out right here. I mean, I can actually grab a hold of the right side and it moves pretty well, and we don't want that. So if we look at a ruler on the left, we got about 95 millimeters. On the right, we have 105 millimeters. That's a 10 millimeter difference between the right and the left side of the machine, and that's exactly why we're going to fix this today. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and take the filament out, which I've already done, unplug the power, and then we're going to remove the extruder cable, the X stepper motor cable, and the X end stop cable connections from the Gantry. So let's start. Go ahead and grab a hold of the extruder cable and slowly pull out that connection. Be careful. Then we're going to go over to the end stop and pull that out. And then we'll go down to the stepper motor and go ahead and remove that. The next step tells us to lower or remove the Z end stop. So what we're going to do is grab our wrench and we're actually going to loosen these two bolts right here and here. So go ahead and loosen that now. Once they're loose, there's a tab down here and you can actually loosen it and pull the tab down below that bar, or you can take the end stop completely off. And I'm actually going to take mine completely off for this. So the next step is to remove the top rail extrusion. So we're going to go ahead and take our Allen wrench and use the small end to get these bolts loose, not the big end, and to go ahead and loosen them. I like to break all of mine loose and then come back and completely remove all the bolts. Then when all the bolts are removed, you can go ahead and keep unscrewing until they're completely removed, and then set the extrusion down on the table behind the printer. So the next step tells us to support the Gantry and remove the Z lead screw, but we can't do that until we loosen this screw down here. So we're going to go ahead and take our Allen wrench, follow the Z screw all the way down, use the small end to go ahead and loosen that small little grub screw, and then turn it around and you can use the big end to fully loosen it if you need to. You will get a little grease on your hand, but that's okay. Make sure it's good and loose. So the next part of that would be to support the Gantry and remove the lead screw and set the Gantry on the table. So what we're going to do is go ahead and support that Gantry, and I like to turn my lead screw all the way up. This allows the Gantry to come completely off the top, and then I'll be able to lift that up carefully, take my lead screw out, and set them both on the table carefully. So next in line, we're going to go ahead and loosen the 4 screws that attach to the bottom of the 2 vertical extrusions. They should be able to be rotated with medium force within the range of the slop that the screws allow. So go ahead and grab your Allen wrench, and we're going to find the 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to go ahead and loosen them just a little bit, just enough so you can actually turn that extrusion with medium force, but it's not fully loose. And we're going to go ahead and loosen all 4 just like that. So next in line, we're actually going to go ahead and remove the 2 screws that hold on that 3-wheel trolley. So I like to keep my Gantry and set it up just like this, but be careful, it will fall down. And it's a little better like this because at least you're not setting it on that hot end and hurting that. So take your Allen wrench, go ahead and loosen up that first bolt if you can get it in there. There we go. And then the 2 bolts are right here. So then go ahead and loosen that second bolt. I like to use the small end always and then shift to that larger end just to screw it out when it's loose. Then when you get both bolts out, go ahead and finish unscrewing them and pulling them out. Then When that's done, you can actually remove that three-wheel trolley. So the next step asks us to take that trolley and put it on the right-hand extrusion. So here's our trolley, and we have 3 wheels. We got 1, 2, and 3. It's kind of like a triangle if you look at it. So here's the right and the left and the top of the triangle. So we're going to take that top and put it on just like this. The left wheel, the right wheel, and the second right wheel go on just like this. And it'll slide on and should be loose, and set it right there. So next on our list is to take the 2 screws securing the horizontal extrusion to the Z drive bracket and loosen them, and then tighten them just past snug. So what we're going to do is take our Allen wrench, take the small end, just like that, and go ahead and loosen the 2 screws up. Oh, just like that. And then if I can get this one in, this is actually tricky while you're trying to film. So let me see, you got it right in like maybe that. Loosen it up and then tighten it just past snug. So just a little bit past snug, just like that. And we're going to do that on both of them. Perfect, just like that. So the next thing on the list is we're going to take that X gantry with the drive trolley. Once we got those 2 bolts loosened and then tightened just past snug, and we're actually going to turn it around and put it right on the left-hand extrusion. So we got it on there like that. Then what we're going to do is take something that's at least 40 millimeters high. This is important so you don't crash your hot end into the bed. I'm going to use blue tape. It's about 50 millimeters high. And we're going to set the X gantry down just like that. So the next step is to go ahead and adjust our eccentric nut on the drive trolley on the left-hand side. So we're going to take the wrench that came with the kit, and that's where the eccentric nut is, right on the front. And using that wrench, we're actually going to back it off slowly until the crossarm can be moved easily from front to back. You'll have some slop in the guide. So go ahead and back it off, and you can kind of check. You'll know when it's nice and loose. And you'll have to adjust it back and forth a few times, just like I'm doing here. And what we want to do is get it nice and sloppy in there so you can actually move it, so there's some play. You'll be able to turn the wheels. So then once you get it that far, you want to take it step by step and go backwards and tighten it just slowly, step by step. So you can feel the wheels when they get stiff, but you can still turn them. You should be okay. But take it in small steps, and you want to go fore and aft until the play in the wheel stops, but no further, because this will cause problems later when your wheels wear out. So then once you're done with that and it moves nice and just like that, you want to go ahead and rest it back down on the bed. So now that you have adjusted the eccentric nut on the left-hand drive trolley, we're going to go to the trolley on the right side and adjust that eccentric nut. As you can see, mine is pretty tight. So we're going to take the wrench that we used before, and the eccentric nut is right on this side. So go ahead and put it in there and go ahead and loosen it just until it gets sloppy. And you can tell, whoa, mine's got a lot of play. So start tightening back step by step until that play is just gone, but not any further. Again, if you go any further than that, you're actually going to hurt the wheels later when you wear them out. So just go back a little further there until it rolls nice and smoothly. And there we go. We should be good. Now that that's adjusted, we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring it down so it's just to the height of that X gantry. So we're going to slide it down just like that. So it's pretty close right there. So it would match up if we had them tight. Then what we're going to do is hold it, and we're going to spin the 2 vertical extrusions just slightly so that the X gantry and that right trolley just match up. And once you do that, it should look something like that. So I thought I would show that X gantry just touching that right trolley up a little closer. So as you can see, I can zoom in a little on that. This is a side view, and we just moved it so it's just touching. And as you can see at the end of my Allen wrench here, there's still just a little gap in here. Also, the bolt isn't in. That's where the bolt goes, right here. But the whole idea of this is to get it nice and flush and twist those top extrusions so it's just touching like this and all lined up. So once you get the right side trolley and the X gantry matched, we're going to go ahead and take these bolts and just connect that right side trolley. I actually spun the printer around so you could see. This is where the first bolt goes. And we're just going to hand tighten that one in. And then use our Allen wrench to go ahead and secure it. So I'll use the long end only to get it loosely tightened in there. And then once it gets a little bit snug, I'm going to swap around to that small end. Always use the small end. You don't want to strip anything out. So use that small end and just get it nice and snug, just like that. The second bolt will actually be on the other side of the power supply, right here. So we'll take that and get it started by hand, and then I'm going to use the long end just to screw the rest of it in loosely there. And then again, always switch to the small end when you want to actually tighten anything up. So I use the long end just like this, get it all the way in, and then switch to that small end, and that's when I actually do my tightening. Just like that. So in the next step, we're going to now temporarily put the top rail in place. We're going to use that with the machined countersunk holes on the top, and you can find those countersunk holes here. So go ahead and set the rail down. I like to put my bolts in first, and then I like to set the rails down just like that, and then hand tighten them in. Once it's hand tightened in, take the small side of your Allen wrench and finish tightening them up, and make sure they're quite snug. You don't want them going anywhere in this step. It's going to be temporary, but you want them tight. So the next step, what we're going to do is prepare for this step by having the Z-rod at hand, and we're going to bring the X gantry up near the top rail. Then we're going to insert the Z-rod by screwing it through the nut until, there we go, until it's into the coupler of the Z stepper. So we're just going to screw this down, and it should go pretty quick, just like this. And then once we get it down into that Z coupler, we want to make sure it's in there. And then we're going to take our Allen wrench and we're going to go ahead and snug up the Z coupler here. So now that the Z-rod is holding weight, you want to go ahead and measure your right gantry. So we have about 76 millimeters, and go ahead and measure your left gantry. We have about 76 millimeters also. If this is off by more than 1 millimeter, then what you want to do is adjust it until it's correct. Because we left these two bolts in here just slightly past snug, you should be able to go ahead and hold the left side here and adjust it up and down accordingly. I'm not going to do that because we're straight on, but what happens is if you do adjust that too much, your X gantry is going to get very loose. Then you're going to have to take this off, snug these back up, and start again. Once you got it perfectly level, what you're going to do is go ahead and loosen that top rail again, and go ahead and take that off. Make sure it's completely loose. Set that aside like we did before. Then you want to take your Allen wrench and use the small side and loosen the coupler just like that. Make sure it's nice and loose. Then support your X gantry and go ahead and lift that off just like we did before, very carefully. And you're also going to want to take your Z-rod out as well. Now we're going to go back to those two bolts in here that we had just past snug before, and we're going to do a final tighten. So we want to do that very firmly to make sure it's very tight, but we want to be very careful so we don't strip that as well. So we're going to take our Allen wrench and carefully put it in here. It's very important that you don't use the big side of the Allen wrench and go down through here like this, because it very easily could strip. So you want to be very careful with that. But once you got it completely tightened, you'll be good to go. So with the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our full X gantry here and put both trolleys onto the extrusions just like that. Make sure it rolls nicely. And we're going to go ahead and set it down and support it on that blue tape like we did before. So for the next step, all we're going to do is take the top rail extrusion and install it back and make sure it is firmly tightened as before. And use the small end and just firmly tighten all 4 bolts. Just like that. All right, the next step, we're going to go ahead and tighten the 4 screws under the vertical extrusions. So these are your vertical extrusions here. We're going to go ahead and tilt the printer back. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that we loosened earlier. And we're just going to go ahead and tighten those up and make sure they're good and secure now. So on to the next step, we're going to go ahead and grab our Z-lead screw and just go ahead and screw it in and install it just like we did earlier. We're going to screw it down, push it right into that coupler. I'm going to make sure it's good in there. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten the coupler screw here. That's it. So the next in line is to go ahead and reconnect all the wiring. So we're going to take the one with the E on it and go ahead and put that in your extruder motor. We're going to take the bigger one with the X on it and go ahead and install that right there. And the other one with the X on it was going to be your end stop. And that's going to get pushed in right in here. Just like that. So the next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and take away the support you were using earlier to hold the X gantry up. Then you're going to want to go ahead and tighten all of your bed leveling screws all the way up. So do them in pairs. I did the front first together, and then the back, and then the front, and then the back. And make sure they're all the way tight. They don't go any more tight. And then what we're going to do is back them off in pairs, 2 in the front and then the 2 in the rear, off of 4 turns. And make sure you work in pairs here. So you want to grab both wheels, and you want to do 4 turns just like that. And from the back, a little more tricky. But do it as best you can and make sure you do it in pairs. And that's going to give you the best result here. Once you got those loosened by 4 turns each, what you're going to do is go ahead and move the nozzle manually to the front left corner of the bed. So we're going to go ahead and push our bed back, and we're going to move this over like this. And then we're going to use the Z screw and just lower it down just like that. And I'm going to set a piece of paper in here, and all we're going to do is go ahead and touch it down right to that piece of paper. Just like that. So once we got that done, we're going to want to go ahead and readjust our Z end stop. So in my case, I took it off. So I'm going to need to put it back on. And we're just going to raise it until we hear a click like this. and then you know that the Z-end stop would be triggered. So if you can't get it down far enough, go ahead and cut this tab off here. You can just take your clip and just go ahead and clip it off with the pair that came. And that'll allow you to lower it down further than that lower extrusion. In our case, I don't need to do that. So once I heard the click, we're in there pretty good. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hand tighten. Take your small side of your Allen wrench and go ahead and make sure it is good and tight. In my case, I don't use my Z-end stop. That's why the cable is hanging out like this. In your case, the cable will be pushed down into the control box here. But once it's tight, the Z-end stop clip, you know that it's going to stop on the way down and you're good to go. All right, now that you've auto-homed, you're done. Your X-gantry should be completely level and stable. It should roll great too. So check out section 1.3 next. That's the bed leveling and tramming section of Luke's guide. Stay tuned, we're putting a video out real soon for that. If you like this, please subscribe below, hit the bell for notifications, and thank you so much. This is The Edge of Tech.